Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we get started, are you thinking of creating a podcast or are you a podcast host already? As a podcast strategist, I can help you to launch or relaunch a purposeful and profitable podcast, which will inspire, entertain, and educate a global audience. Simply book in a one-to-one call with me right now via the Calendly link in the show notes, and together we'll focus on the purpose of your podcast. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Steve Bustin. Hello, Steve. How's it going?
Hey there, Amy. I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. It's been a really sunny day, delightful day compared to the last couple of days, which have been horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not here to talk about the weather.
Oh, why not? That's always a good topic to start with.
It's a very British thing to do, isn't
it?
But or maybe it's a worldwide thing. It's just that we seem to have such drastic. Anyway, I'm going into the weather. I'm not going to talk about the weather. Tell me, Steve, what is it you're doing at the moment?
At the moment, I think it's fair to say the majority of my time is spent as a public speaking coach. I work with individuals who are presenting, speaking, pitching for whatever reason, whether that's people who are looking to be professional speakers, whether that's people who are pitching for business, whether that's people who are looking to speak at conferences as part of their business development strategy. So I help them to get their speeches right, to get their speaking skills in order, and to practice. So one of the things that I'm really keen on is this whole idea of critique and feedback for speakers to make sure that they are as good as they can be.
And you talk about getting your speaking skills in order. Can you isolate it, or does it fold into other areas?
Oh, it absolutely overlaps with other areas. It obviously overlaps with your expertise. It overlaps with whatever it is that you are passionate about, the points you want to make, the people you're speaking to. And I think it also overlaps into business skills. It overlaps into life experience, because so often we bring our life experiences to the stage or to the screen, if we're doing stuff online. And I think, I'm a big believer that actually we are one person in terms of business and personal life. And while it is important to maintain boundaries and to make sure that you are having a personal life, particularly if you're running your own business, I think the idea that you can somehow be one person at work and one person at home is wrong. I think if you're trying to pull that off, you're actually going to end up being schizophrenic. So I think I think there's also overlap there. That with so much of we might be putting on our best business face, but actually we are still the same person inside. I mean, I've always said the biggest compliment I can get if I'm on stage as a speaker is if people say you're exactly the same on stage as you are off. I take that as a huge compliment.
So stage or screen and everything in between, just one person.
Yeah.
I love that concept. And you talked about the different elements that fold into this, that it's a life experience, it's your passions and what you're passionate about and the expertise in your business. How did you arrive to this point, Steve?
Do you want the biography, do you? Well, I'm a journalist by background. Don't hate me. I've never hacked a phone, I promise. So I suppose I've always been interested in communications. Even when I was a kid, when I was about 8 or 9, I started a family newspaper called News Weekly. It didn't appear weekly, it has to be said, and it didn't have any news in it. But I used to produce it on a little typewriter, and then it would be passed around my 2 siblings and my parents, and they'd be forced to read it. And it would be a mixture of sort of features and articles. And it was, and so I've always been intrigued by communication and how we communicate. And I was one of those kids who always wanted to get up in assembly and speak. And, we went to church and I was a kid and, I was one giving the readings and all this sort of stuff. I've always quite enjoyed speaking to an audience. Professionally, I started as a journalist, worked for BBC News for many years. Worked across radio and TV news, based initially at Broadcasting House and then at Television Centre. And then I crossed to the dark side when I was headhunted to go and become PR director for a .com. Now, this was in 2000, actually, which was really the first big .com bubble. And as startups at the time were sort of prone to do, we burnt our way through £3.5 million of venture capital money and promptly went bust. I'm glad it wasn't my money, but I have to say we had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, we really did have the warehouse offices in Shoreditch, and we had staff days out at health farms, and we did live the whole .com sort of dream, which was, I mean, it was great fun, but I wasn't the only one who could see that the business was not going to succeed. It became quite clear that the business model wasn't right. Watching a business go out of business taught me a huge amount about business. Because interestingly, having come from the BBC, which is not a profit-driven organization, I didn't really understand the drive for profit and the need for liquidity and all those sorts of things until I went into that .com. When that went down, I then went freelance, really, and I was just taking odds and sods of freelance work. I thought to tide myself over until I got a, quote, proper job. But it was actually an employment agency turned around to me and said, we don't think we're going to be able to place you. They said, you've come up to sort of a relatively senior level in journalism, you've crossed into a sort of senior role in PR, you haven't come up agency side, you haven't really come up in-house. The sort of people who we would be able to place you with don't know what to do with you. And actually, at the time, I was devastated. But in fact, it was probably the best thing they could have said, because it made me realize that I was going to have to do something on my own. I'd sort of thought that actually, if I put my CV out with agencies, something would come in. So that was when I was sort of suddenly thought, well, actually, this freelance work is doing okay. I'm making a go of this. I'm making a living. So I stuck with it. And I've now been in business 20 years. In fact, actually, it's 20 years this month that I've been in business. So initially, I was offering PR consultancy, but I was also working as a freelance journalist, which is a slightly unholy combination. And I did have to be very careful that I was very clear when I was working with my PR hat on and when I was working with my journalist hat on. And occasionally I would pitch to the same editors. So I'd have to say, look, this is a PR pitch or this is an editorial pitch. And even more occasionally, an editor would say to a PR pitch, oh, do you want to write that up? And I'm like, no, I can't. Actually, professionally, I just can't go there. I had to keep those two separate. But relatively early on in the PR business, people started asking me to go in and run training for them. I was a very early adopter with social media. I had a flatmate when I first moved to London who was an even earlier adopter, and he got me onto social media. So then when I say social media, I mean, this is just the internet generally. We used to be on CompuServe, which I suspect you are far too young to remember, but we were on CompuServe. And I became part of the team that introduced the internet into the BBC newsroom, and got people online, and even to things like encouraging them to use email and all this stuff. So anyway, I met my husband on a very early form of social media, just as the .com was going down. So people started saying, "Oh, would you come in and talk to us about this thing, social media? What is it? Why should we be interested in it? What could it do for us?" And I went in and did a couple of training courses for organizations. And then somebody said, "Oh, would you come to our conference and speak about this?" I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." Went to this conference. Somebody saw me there and said, "Oh, could you come to our conference and speak about that?" So I went and did that. Did a few of those sorts of gigs. And then somebody said, "Oh, actually, you're good on stage. Do you do presentation skills training?" I was like, "I do now." So I realized that actually, there was a training side of the business building as well. The PR company grew, and I ended up taking on a couple of people who worked with me. And then I had one big client went, tits up, quite frankly. They stopped paying me. I was still paying the staff. I ended up tens of thousands of pounds out of pocket, and I had to let the staff go. And that was a big learning curve. And we ended up they were taken to court by HMRC, and I think we all got. I think what I ended up with was a £13,000 debt was in the end, because they did pay a bit of what they owed me, and I think of that I got £70 or something. It was like fractions of a penny and a pound. So that was at that point. That was when I started to realize I wasn't sure this was quite what I wanted to be doing long term. And I was working with a business coach, and she said to me, "If a client rings you up tomorrow and says, 'We're going to pay you a full fee day, what do you want to do?' And I straight away went, 'I'll go and do presentation skills.' And she said, 'They're not PR.' It's like, well, no, presentation skills. She said, 'So why are you still doing PR?' And I just thought, it was funny. It was a real light bulb moment. I was like, you're absolutely right. Why am I still doing something that's not really, it's not making me happy anymore? I'm not particularly enjoying it. I'm good at it. I know I am. I always have been. But it's not actually floating my boat anymore. So I ended up sacking my last PR client, which was a bit of an event. And I missed the retainers. I have to say it. That was one of the joys of having an agency, is the retainers. But that's when I moved full-time into training, coaching, and speaking. And that's been the best part of 10 years now. So, yeah, so I then sort of now do a mixture of speech coaching, speaking, and also I do a lot of work as a compere and host. So I do a lot of comparing at conferences and events and auctions and parties and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's 20 years reduced to about 4 minutes, I think. So, yeah, that's about it.
Fantastic. If only all my guests could be so concise. Actually, what I want to just sort of pull on a thread here is you said that you were writing at the age of 8 and 9 your fabulous family weekly newsletter, and also that you were always desperate to speak in assembly and desperate to speak in church, and yet that sort of fell away, and then you've come back to it.
Yeah.
How do you see that as being purposeful or accidental or neither or both?
Well, first of all, I don't think it ever really fell away. Even, because broadcasting, I mean, although I wasn't particularly on camera or on mic, being in particularly in broadcast news, there's, it's all about communication and getting a message across and things. And also I then became chair of the London Gay Men's Chorus, which when I took over was a small group of 30 guys singing in pubs. And by the time I stepped down 3 years later was 120 guys singing on national TV and touring internationally. But that led me to doing quite a lot more public speaking. So I was speaking on stage at events, and I ended up comparing or hosting the vigil that took place after the Admiral Duncan bombing, when there was a nail bombing at a gay pub in London. And I ended up hosting the vigil that took place in Soho Square a couple of days later. So it's always been part of my life. It's always been, but I don't think at the time I realized that it was an option to be professional. And so I think in terms of, was it purpose driven? No, but I think it was about recognizing what I was good at and realizing that was an avenue to not just making a living, but doing something I enjoyed. And that to me is a big driver. It's got to be I've got to be doing something that I enjoy. Otherwise, why do it, sort of thing. I've often said to people, if you get Sunday night blues, you're in the wrong job. If you are going to bed on a Sunday night thinking, oh God, it's back to work tomorrow, I'm fine. We all prefer a weekend to a weekday. I get that. But if you are actually dreading what it is you've got to go and do, or it's a real, downer, you're in the wrong job. Go and do something else. And there's a real inertia around that. I think that people feel that once they're in something, they have to be stuck in it. And sometimes actually taking a complete right turn can be quite a refreshing thing to do. So purpose-wise, I think it was about recognizing, that I had a talent and that actually that talent could be monetized.
And going back to that moment where you felt devastated because the recruitment agent had said to you, don't know where to put you anymore. And yet you said in reflection, it was the best thing that happened to you. What would be the alternative sliding doors moment? Where would you be now?
Well, interestingly, I mean, it's one of the things that's awakened my interest in feedback and how people give feedback and things, because actually by somebody being honest with me, I was able to move on and do something more useful. Sliding doors moment, I suspect I would have gone into a PR agency and probably actually I think I would have, could have been quite senior in a PR agency. I'm not sure I would have ever gone into my own PR agency. I don't think I would have run my own business. I probably would have ended up working for somebody else. Probably would be earning significantly more money than I'm earning now. But I would also be working significantly more hours than I'm working now. I may not have met my husband because actually I would have, that was linked to where I happened to be based for the .com. So yeah, I think life would have taken a very different path. And I try not to get into what ifs or what might have been. I've had occasionally people said, do you regret leaving the BBC? And I'm like, well, no, because at the time it was the right decision. I was a bit bored at the BBC. My career wasn't going quite where I wanted it to go. I was looking around. I needed something new. I needed a fresh challenge. and I think it's so easy to start using hindsight to start, oh, actually, I should have done that, or I shouldn't have done that. I think it's a fool's game, because you actually do you have to just take a decision of what feels right at the moment and then own it. And it's fine, 5 years down the line, you might have made a different decision. But at the time, if that's what felt right, you've got to do it. And I think it's not that I'm short-termist, but I recognize the importance of living in the here and now. And I think if something is wrong right now, what can I do to change that? I don't have a great life plan. I don't have a plan for where I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, let alone 20 years. I'm like, this is where I'm at now. This is what's working. This is what isn't. What's in my control. What's not in my control. So I try to make decisions on that basis rather than seeing it as some part of some great overall long-term plan.
And your perspective, Steve, which is very much in the moment, which is fabulous because it allows you to really appreciate what you're doing and be present for those around you in your working and live and personal environment. How has that manifested? Has that come through any kind of personal development, or is it just the way you are?
It's just the way I am. If I say I've never really done any personal development, I've never done any formal personal development, certainly. But I do know that I need to challenge myself from time to time. I know that I need to be taken out of my comfort zone from time to time. I wouldn't be doing what I do, particularly as a speaker and compere, if I didn't like being taken out of my comfort zone. So I sometimes have to force myself to do it. One of the things I do a lot of now is improv. And I did improv comedy for some time, and I now do a lot of musical improv, so making up songs on the spot. And it's funny, I did a course last year with musical improv, and the night of the first class, part of me was like, I really don't want to go and do this. Why on earth did I sign up for this? And I went, and actually I loved it. And it was because it does challenge me, and it does take me out of my comfort zone, and it does just make me, and I think every now and again, you need a moment, you need something that just makes you wonder, why on earth did I make this decision? I'm not one for high adrenaline sports. I'm not one for living life dangerously. But I think you do still need to be taken out of your comfort zone from time to time. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, more so. And it's really interesting because the moment, I don't know how to actually put that into quotes, or when we're going to use this in describing it to people, it's like a moment. But yeah, I recognize those moments a huge amount, and every day I'm always thinking, how can I push myself? I mean, not every day does it happen, but it's always there as a development and a growth and a challenge for me. And my word for this year is adventure. Right. And like you, I don't like long-term plans. I do say have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why as a guide. And that works with my values. It works with my beliefs. And listening to what you're saying here, echo quite a lot of the accidental career, the accidental going from one moment to the moment. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of for me, it is driven. And I suppose this takes us to the core of the question about why and what the purpose is. To me, it's, am I enjoying it? Am I going to enjoy it? Is this something that's going to be fun? And yes, I need to push myself and go through that moment of, why on earth did I say yes to this? And I've done speaking gigs, I've done comparing gigs where I've just been stood backstage thinking, why on earth did I say yes to this? And occasionally you just end up going, just think of the money and get on with it. But yeah, it's got to be something that's got to be fun, and it's got to give me pleasure, and it's got to give me satisfaction. And that might sound horribly selfish. And yet, I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing other people succeed. I love coaching people and suddenly seeing them have a light bulb moment, or suddenly have a breakthrough where they go, oh, okay, I get this. And yes, that works, and things. And that gives me a great deal of pleasure. So, and it's like, if I'm on stage, if I get a laugh out of an audience, that gives me a great deal of pleasure. So that's why I go back and keep on doing it. And it's not that I'm driven by some higher purpose of changing people's lives and transforming them and all this sort of stuff. But if I can give them what they need, whether that, and hopefully that includes pleasure, and sorry, that sounds slightly smutty, but it's one of those things where, I want to help them move forward, and that gives me the pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction that I'm seeking from life. So yeah, I will. And it's not that I don't think I'm a hedonist, but that's a lot of what drives me and drives the decisions. Is this going to be fun? And there are times where I'll try it, and if something isn't fun, then I'll find fine, I stop. But at least I tried it. But I'm not a thrill seeker particularly. But I am. Yeah, I know I need to challenge myself, and I can recognize in myself when I am in a bit of a rut, when I need to do something new, and when I need to move forward. And it's interesting at the moment. Professionally, I mean, things moved last year because of the pandemic over the last couple of years. And I mean, as you know, Amy, I launched a couple of different things. I launched Speech Club, which is it's like a book club but for speeches, and I launched Critique Club, which is a coaching program, which I know you know very well. And those have been great, and they're now bedding in. But interestingly, when I first launched them, I got really nervous, and even Speech Club now, I still get nervous before doing those. And it is something. If there is part of me is like, what happens if I get challenged? What happens if somebody disagrees? What happens if I forget what I'm going to say? And it's like, it does. They all go fine. I've done 11 of them now. There's number 12 is in a couple of weeks' time, and they're fine. They go really well. People enjoy them. People get a lot out of them, and that's what drives me to keep on doing it. But I'm aware now that this year I'm just thinking, okay, I've got those. They're running. I've got to, I've got to keep filling them, and there is an element of repetition to it, but that's fine. So what's next? What am I going to do next? And I'm now thinking professionally, I've got a new product which I'm about to take to market, which is sort of a corporate version of the Critique Club model. But I'm also now thinking, what do I want to do outside work? The last couple of years have been very, very work focused, partly because of the pandemic and having to pivot and all that sort of stuff. So this year I'm determined to do some stuff outside work that just gives me pleasure and brings pleasure to other people and that I enjoy. And if it bleeds into work at some point, fine, great. But I'm not, I'm actually thinking of starting a podcast on something completely unrelated to what I do professionally. And it's just, and a part of me wants to make sure that it is done for pleasure and because it opens up a different part of my life rather than because actually I need to do this for work.
So what I'm picking up on here is that you mentioned there's no higher purpose, but there's still this level of being led by something. And I see it as being pleasure led. That is the focus. That is at the core of everything you're doing. It has to tick that box. And from that perspective, you also said that you're not into high adrenaline sports, but you do get the adrenaline from your work.
Yeah.
In a huge amounts. Yes.
And also from improv and things. And I will, and yeah, absolutely. You stand on stage, you suddenly put yourself in front of an audience you don't know. And yes, there's absolutely adrenaline and the associated high and then the associated crash afterwards. But yeah, it is. So there is an adrenaline rush, it's odd, isn't it? Because to so many people, they would rather go, I don't know, parascending than stand on the stage and deliver a speech. I have a T-shirt, which I bought at a conference a couple of years ago, which says, "Your greatest fear is how I make a living." And there is an element of truth in that. I'm aware to some people, the idea of giving a speech is just absolutely terrifying. I was funny when I was wearing the T-shirt a while back, actually in a garden centre or something. And somebody read it and went, "What, you work with spiders?" And I'm like, no, I don't. Because actually, I would not work with spiders. They are one of my greatest fears. I hate spiders.
It would be a great social media post actually to put up there and just say, what do I do for a living?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if don't say anything and just see how many different responses or different careers you could have.
I will do that. That's a really great idea. Thank you for that. I will do that. And I will report back.
Yeah, look forward to seeing how many. Well, you're just identifying everybody's phobias in the world, aren't you?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Yes. Be interesting to see what they say.
So not a thrill seeker, but still very much pushing and exploring and growing. What are the core values that you hold tight to your core?
Fun, laughter, and satisfaction. I like to see a job well done. I will see something through to the bitter end, and I know other people who are not finishers. People will start stuff and then lose interest halfway through. And actually, I want to see it through. And I'm also a big believer. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. I want to make a good job of it. I want to make sure stuff looks professional. I want to make sure it serves the purpose. So yeah, I think those are probably what drive me. I'm not looking, I don't believe I'm put on this planet to change the world sort of thing. I don't believe that I'm out there to transform people's lives. But if I can bring pleasure to people and if I can give them something that is useful to them, then I think that's a job well done.
And I know you said, you actually described it earlier as almost sounding selfish, that was your focus, and yet you then also did back it up, saying that it is about the satisfaction of seeing other people succeed that makes a difference for you. Saying that you're not put on the planet to change the world, but actually going back to some of the moments, and particularly leading the vigil for the Admiral Duncan bombing, and also taking your chorus from pubs to international touring, and from the numbers. How do those not change the world?
I suppose they do. And actually, I think, but what they do is they change individuals. And I mean, in fact, and that's what changing the world would be, I suppose. You can't change the world without changing individuals. I take more joy from something like looking back at the London Gay Men's Chorus, which is 20 odd years ago now. More than that, yikes, 25. It's, I know that there are couples who are together because they met in the choir. There are people who came out to their parents because of the choir. We had, as the choir, we did play a role in some of the campaigning around an equal age of consent and gay marriage, and also challenging perceptions of what it meant to be gay. Because it was the late 90s was a very different environment to where we are now, thankfully. So yeah, I mean, in that respect, I hope it did change. I hope it did change people's lives, and it helped change people's minds. So yeah, but I'm driven by the individual change rather than by the global change. I'm not somebody who seeks to change the bigger picture. I'm more interested in individuals and what I can bring and give to them.
Yeah, the small ripples actually, and some of them you may not even ever hear from or know.
No, it's funny. We have a Facebook group for alumni of the London Gay Men's Chorus, and somebody on there 6 months or so ago said, "Who? Oh, I did know. I sort of remembered them." And he went, "Oh," he said, I can't remember what the trigger was, but he said, when I first rang, there was a phone number in the back of Gay Times that you could ring if you were interested in joining the choir." And he said, I had to summon every fibre of bravery in my body to ring that number. And that number was my home phone number. It was my home phone number. Which was, with hindsight, was probably a mistake, having my home phone number published in the back of Gay Times. Anyway, but anyway, he rang, and he said in his post, he said the person who answered, who I now know was Steve Bustin, just made me feel so welcome and so relaxed and so at ease that I knew this was the right thing for me, and joining the chorus was one of the best things I ever did in my life. And I just think, well, I take huge pride in that sort of thing, and that to me that's the measure of success. Is that you're able to bring, because long term, I think we were able to bring pleasure to him, and security and strength and those sorts of things.
And just picking up on what you were mentioning earlier about the two elements, or the two focuses that you've got at the moment, the speech club and the critique club, I just want to add my perspective of being in the audience. And it's funny that you said that you get nervous and you're concerned that you may get challenged, but I know that we have had some challenges on those calls, and that there have been some very diverse opinions, and that's what makes it great.
Yeah, it does. But it's funny. It is funny how I do get nervous, because there is that thing about I'm not somebody of strong opinions, particularly, and I'm not somebody who wants to voice my opinion on people. You won't find me commenting on huge arguments and discussions and rows and things on social media. It's just not. It's just it gives me no pleasure, and I don't particularly feel the need to. So sometimes I find that I'm reluctant to draw a line in the sand and say, this is my opinion, this is how it is. And I suppose when I'm doing something like Speech Club, because I'm saying this is a good speech and this is why, when somebody challenges, to a certain extent, it feels like they're challenging my authority or my knowledge or my experience. But in fact, there is nothing wrong with that. There are no absolutes. There are no rights or wrongs and that sort of thing. There are only opinions, and everybody's opinion is valid on the whole. I think, and that's the thing. I do believe most people's opinions are valid, or everybody's opinion is valid. How you express it is not necessarily valid.
Yeah.
If you express it with respect, great. If you express your opinion with rudeness, not so great.
And I don't think anybody ever challenges your expertise, Steve, when you're sharing your thoughts, your insights. That is a given. That's like, this is fantastic. Thank you very much. And we're all busy scribing notes for every time. I think what comes out of the conversation is just how different the messages hit in different ways, which is for me fascinating. And again, with the conversation we're having here about purpose, no one is the same.
No, absolutely. And nor should they be. And, I do think there's a real danger of people trying to copy others in the way they live their life, or the way they run their business, or the way they speak from the stage, or the way they write, or the messages they put across. And, there's a lot of wannabes out there. And I think that is one of the first refuges of the wannabe is parroting what somebody else says. And I think it's particularly true. I think a lot of it comes across in the sort of motivational, inspirational speaking stuff, which I do not enjoy. It does nothing for me. In fact, quite a lot of it I actually object to, because I think a lot of it is based on bullshit, and I think some of it's damaging, quite frankly. And I think there's an awful lot of quackery and fakery and making bold claims and all this sort of stuff. And also then you just see lots of people parroting other people and being lauded for it, or just making just making claims that are so vague or so ethereal and that have no substance. And it's not necessarily. I'm not necessarily talking about needing scientific substance, which I think it does need. But people, the whole thing about I faced a challenge and overcame it, therefore you can too. And I'm just like, no, actually, because we're all different, and it's great. You overcame a challenge, brilliant. But just to glibly say, and now you can too, I think that winds me up. I have to say that stuff really winds me up. So I try not to get into telling other people what they should do and how they should do it, in terms of living their life. In terms of something practical like public speaking, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell people what I think they should be doing, and it's entirely up to them whether or not they take my advice. It's up to them if people hear me expressing an opinion about a speech, whether or not they agree with it. That's absolutely fine. But I try not to tell people how they should be living their lives, because everybody is different, and I object when other people tell me how I should be living my life.
Yeah, and rightly so. So the perspective that you bring to your expertise, Steve, is one of objective versus subjective. There's a fine line between the two of understanding what they want to achieve with their speaking, and then how they then deliver that. You're very much on the practical perspective, right? Okay, this is going to be a great way for you to deliver it, but the content is very much from the individual. You're just tweaking, teasing out more interesting elements.
Yes. I find myself using a lot of phrases like, have you thought of doing? Let's try this. I certainly try to avoid saying, you need to do this. I will say, we could do with a bit more of this, or this is maybe where we're lacking. What can we do to boost it? So I think of myself very much as a coach in that respect. I suppose to me, a coach is somebody who will encourage and give people options and allow people to explore what they want to do, rather than somebody who is just going to say, this is what you need to do. I don't want to turn out mini-me's. If somebody said, I can tell you've been through Steve Bustin's Critique Club program, I would worry, because actually I want people to come out being themselves. I don't want people to suddenly take on the Steve Bustin way of doing things. And there is a well-known American franchise speaking organization that teaches people to speak, that you can spot the people who've been through their program a mile off. They only have to walk to the middle of the stage and pause, and you go, oh, right, okay, yeah, I know where they've been. And it just, that annoys me, the fact they're turning out clones, they're turning out this is somehow the right way to speak. There is no right way to speak. I've seen some people who are appalling speakers deliver the most amazing speeches because actually it's right for them and their delivery is right for them and their content is right for them. Wouldn't work for somebody else, but actually it's about what's right for them. And that's what I always seek to find, is what's right for them and by extension, their audience.
So authenticity is at the core here.
Yeah.
Or is that a word you're not?
It's funny. It's a word I recoil from slightly, partly because it's so overdone, and I think it comes out of the self-help, personal development stuff. Because actually, try and define authenticity, and it's very difficult. To me, it's about making the best. It's finding the best in people, playing to their strengths, and there's an element of being more them. That's always interesting to be able to pull out and allow. I want to help people have more fun. I'm working with somebody at the moment through the critique program, who has suddenly blossomed because they've realised they can be funny, and they had always understood they couldn't be because they were talking about business topic and that actually it didn't go anywhere. And suddenly they've realised that they can be funny, and they're really enjoying being funny and getting laughs, and they now want to get more laughs. And actually, I think their speaking about a business topic is going to be far more effective, and they'll get booked more often, and their audience will get more out of it because they're now having fun on stage and their audience is having fun. There are very few speeches that couldn't be improved with a few laughs, quite frankly. Even the people speaking on the most, in fact, I was going to say, even the people speaking on the darkest of topics. In fact, I would say the people who are speaking on the darkest of topics absolutely need some humor in there, otherwise you can leave an audience in a terrible state. It's one of the things I have seen a few times. I had to persuade a few people away from is crashing the audience into a most appalling state, by telling an appalling story, either without preparing them for it or without giving them some sort of relief afterwards. So it is one of those things I've seen, and it's something you quite often see through beginner speakers. Suddenly they just tell this most appalling story, which I'm sure, and which is obviously incredibly real to them, but an audience has to be ready to accept a story like that.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a podcast on horizon, very exciting. We've got your new product, which is going to take your critique club into a corporate model or a world of there. And we've got more fun outside work. What does that look like?
Well, there's a few things for this year. Partly, my husband and I have just had a big house extension and our garden remodeled, which has just finished. So I'm about to start planting a new garden, which is, as somebody I have a horticulture qualification in my background, and I'm a keen gardener. We used to open our garden for charity. So the opportunity to start from scratch is unbelievably exciting. Very expensive, but unbelievably exciting. I'm literally writing planting lists and shopping lists and things at the moment. I'm just, about to drop certainly hundreds, if not thousands of pounds on plants. So that's very exciting. And that's also, the garden is my creative space, and it's also my, I won't say meditative space, but it's absolutely where I just go to unwind and can be in my own space. My husband always says, if the house suddenly goes quiet, he doesn't, he knows I must be out in the garden. He said, normally he'll find me in the greenhouse, potting up, listening to Radio 4 with a cup of tea, and I'm a very happy man. So more of that. The other thing that we are doing, which may conflict slightly with this brand new garden, is we have a new puppy on the agenda. We are just waiting for confirmation from the breeder that their bitch is pregnant, and hopefully we will be getting a pup in mid-May, who will probably then, having just spent all this money on new house and new garden, I suspect will come in and dig the garden and chew the corners and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, we have been without a dog for almost 2 years now, and we're both desperately looking forward to having a new dog. So that will bring more fun, and that also brings exercise and all those sorts of things, which are also good because walking is great. And actually, I'm hoping the podcast will bring more fun as well. What I'm looking at the moment is developing a podcast sort of aimed at gay men over 50. Not that I want it to be issue based. I don't want it to, it's not about sort of, how do we live our lives and think pieces. It's just our voices don't actually exist that much in the podcast sphere. I've been searching on podcasts to try and find, quote, my voice, or people who are living life as I live it, and actually couldn't find it. So I'm sort of casting at the moment. I'm talking to a few friends about coming together to run I want to do a sort of posse type podcast. One of the things where it sounds like you're eavesdropping on a dinner party sort of thing. I came across a podcast based in New York called Food for Thought, THOT, which is a group of 20 and 30 something queer writers, artists, thinkers. And you just listen into their conversation. And I've learned so much about their life as they experience it. And it's made me realize actually how life has moved on and how a new generation is living life in a very different way. And it's just, to me, that's been fascinating. But I just thought when they start then moving up into their 40s and then into their 50s, those voices aren't there. If somebody is becoming a gay man in their 50s, and you just want to hear other people, and particularly if you are isolated, maybe even closeted, I just think I want those voices out there and say it's not. I don't want it to be I want it to be entertaining, not issue-led. It's not. I don't want it to be a sort of self-help thing. So yeah, that's the plan, and I need to make it happen. Actually, it's one of those things that's been sat in the back of my head for too long, and I just need to make that work.
Fantastic. It sounds amazing. And there's absolutely no reason why the puppy will dig up anything in your garden if it's well trained. So yeah, absolutely. But be mindful of some plants that may be poisonous to dogs. I'm sure you've got that on the list already.
Yes, absolutely.
But no, I'm a huge green finger person myself, and I love my garden, but I'm looking out at it now and it's all died back, and it's like, come on, get going again. Yeah. So
but there's something nice about the potential of a garden at this time of year, particularly because you should be starting to see bulbs just coming through, and the snowdrops will be in flower very soon, and I've got a few crocuses in flower and things, and that sense of progression and potential, and knowing that in 6-7 months' time it will be full and lush and colourful and fragrant and all those sorts of things is part of the fun of it. And I sometimes pity people who garden in tropical climates where there are no seasons. Because actually they don't have that sense. I've always been fascinated by the turning of the year, and I tap into some of the druidic traditions and things, and just that interests me, and things like equinoxes and solstices and those sort of patterns I've always found fascinating, and the garden it accentuates that because the garden responds to a lot of those things. So yes, I think by the time this podcast goes out, it'll be Imbolc, which is a time of great hope, because it's actually, it's about the starting of growth and new life appearing and things.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. So my fabulous jasmine, which dies back just for 1 month in the year and then comes back in force. I think it's a Fiona Sunrise was the actual name of it. It's just stunning, and it's taken over an entire wall. It's beautiful. So highly recommend that if you like jasmine.
I was going to say, well, actually, I am looking for jasmines at the moment. So yeah,
that particular one, Fiona Sunrise. I'll send you a link, because it's just stunning. The smell is sensational. It's non-invasive in terms of how you have to push it up against a trellis, but it will just keep going. It's fabulous. I planted 2 small plants, and they're full height a few years later. So incredible. But yeah, enjoy seeing your garden grow, and yeah, a time of great hope. I love that. I think that's might even be the name of your podcast, Steve.
Absolutely, it does sound rather like the name of one of the Star Wars movies.
It does. Yeah, that was A New Hope, wasn't it?
That was, yes, absolutely,
for sure. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about why you do what you do, and that it's very much led from pleasure, which is fabulous. Really, really great. How will people get in contact with you? I'm sure people want to know more about Speech Club, Critique Club.
Well, my business is called Get Your Voice Heard, so getyourvoiceheard.co.uk. Speech Club, which is the free monthly event where we critique a speech, is speech-club.co.uk. Critique Club, which is the monthly coaching program, is critiqueclub.co.uk. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Stephen Brighton. I don't post a huge amount on those platforms. I've only really just got into Instagram. But if you want to start seeing my garden, that's probably where it'll go, is onto Insta. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as Steve Bustin, and reach out to me there. Fabulous.
Well, I'll put them all in the show notes. So, Steve, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I love the challenges that you set yourself. It will definitely I know from being in your critique club, I have got some challenges ahead of me this year. So looking forward to those and looking forward to you guiding me as an expert coach on that side.
Good.
How would you like to close out today's episode, Steve?
You have to enjoy life. Life is so short. And one of the things that drives me is I always try to say yes. I will try to default to yes, because you never know where that will take you. A no will stop the opportunities, but a yes will open up the opportunities. But I will always stop and question myself: Am I enjoying this? Am I going to enjoy it? If not, why do it? Why put yourself something that you're going to hate? Unless there is obviously something that will lead to a pleasure or enjoyment, satisfaction later on. Because sometimes, occasionally we have to do things we don't want to do. But on the whole, seek enjoyment, seek pleasure, and that absolutely works within business and employment and all those things as it does in your personal life. People seem to think that they should be mutually exclusive, that somehow you shouldn't enjoy what you do to earn a living. I think that's wrong.
Thank you for listening to Focus on Why with me, Amy Rowlandson. To show your appreciation and to help other listeners understand what value you have received from tuning in today, please leave me an Apple Podcast 5-star review. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.